Yeah, I got another project here now that come up. This is the bucket for the skid steer for the Bobcat, and it's just kind of beat up. It was cobbled together to begin with. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but it just put together out a bunch of scrap, it looks like, odds and ends. But it's been rode hard and put away wet. It was pretty well wore out when I got it, and we've dug a lot of rock with it, hauled a lot of mud with it, and done a lot of work with it, and it's just showing its wear. This is the Bobcat attachment here. It's got this angular piece down here at the bottom. It's got a couple of holes in it, cut in it for a pin to go down into. And then this piece up here, this strap up here at the top is welded at an angle, and a wedge fits up in there. It pulls down, and then the pins pull it in tight. Well, all of this wedge down here is all cracked out and splitting apart. You know, there's a weld there that's cracked, and the cutouts here for the pins are pretty well busted out and bent up. On this side it's really bad, and then welds are cracked out up here on the top where this attachment attaches to the bucket, and so it's gotten so sloppy that it won't stay on the skid steer. It was loosening up to the point where when you back up with it to try to drag a little bit, it would just pull off, but now it's got to the point where it won't even stay on. Also cracked out here where the sides attach. I take the snow here and push it down to the highway and pile it up down there, and then when it gets piled up, then I'll put the bucket on and dig the berm out and haul it across the highway. There's about a 10-foot drop off immediately right off the edge of the highway there, and then it drops down pretty steep away from that, so I can dump a lot of snow on there, push it out, pack it down, and just keep going out with it. And then this year we took some of the snow and hauled it down the highway a couple hundred yards and built a little snow road into a place. We had some logs down there. It's snowing again now, and the snow's piling up down there, so I'm going to need the bucket to move some snow. So I guess I got to get busy and get this fixed. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the torch and cut this lower section off here, and I've got a nice heavy length of angle iron that I'll weld in there and cut out the spots for the pins on the Bobcat, and then we'll see what we can do about welding the rest of it up and stiffening it up. Don't have much for a welder, just that little 140 amp wire feed, so it's going to be kind of a challenge there. I got this first lower wedge. There's the one on the other side still. I had this first one cut off of there. And once I started cutting this, this lower part of that wedge looked like it was angle iron. It's not. It's a second piece that was welded on there to stiffen that up. The main part of it is that top piece right there with the holes in it for the pin to come down through. Now I took a square and chalk line, soapstone line, and drew a line projected out from where those holes for the pin went, and cut this back side off. And then once I started cutting the front side, well, I couldn't see anything because I'm looking into the sun, out into the snow, and it's too bright out there and dark in here, so I had to fix my lights. And once I got some light on it, I could see. And once I started cutting that and got that heated up, I just followed the crack. It was cracked out all the way down to here, so most of that was all cracked out. So I'm going to take the torch and trim up a couple of the little nuggets on there, and this weld down here on this lower side. On the bottom, I'm gonna blow that off of there before I grind it, save some grinding time. You can see this thing wasn't exactly put on there best. This plate right here is a Bobcat attachment, and that was welded on, but this back was cobbled together out of a bunch of different kinds of scrap, and this Bobcat is set so far off of this, it's welded onto another piece, and there's so much gaps in there, the welds are not the best. We got that big thick piece of angle iron there that I'll fit in here for a new attachment once I get this all trimmed up and everything. So I'll go ahead and blow those pieces off and fit that up before I put the grinder out to finish polishing it up. I got this all trimmed up here where this plate goes, and I took this piece of angle and cut it off to the length that I wanted it. I thought that was gonna, that 45, well see that's a 90, so sitting here flat on this would make it 45. I thought that would be the right angle, but turns out that is quite a bit flatter than a 45. So I went and I found some 1/2 inch plate, and I cut off some little tabs there, weld on that, which picks the back end of that up enough. It brings it up so it's just about right for the angle that I need. So getting those welded on, and I gotta wait for my circuit breaker to cool down. I got this first side, the left side, all welded on. I guess it turned out okay. I was having a hard time with my welds. Well, I'm pushing this little machine just about to its limit here, this 140 amp, 130 amp welder. Pushing it to its limit with this material. These spacers that I put in here are 1/2 inch, and then this is 1/4 inch, this angle iron. So that's pushing that little thing. I had it turned up all the way as high as it could go, well, pretty close to as high as it could go, and I was able to get pretty good penetration in there. Problem was I welded one tab on the outside here and the corners, and I was able to get about halfway on this other tab before it flipped the circuit breaker. Got the circuit breaker back on, and then waited a while for everything to cool off, and then I was able to get a little bit more of each one of these. Got these bottoms welded on pretty good, and I got pretty good penetration on them, and then same with this top. But it kept kicking the circuit breaker, and more often it does that, even though it's only 30 degrees outside and the circuit box is outside, and there's nothing around it. It's got plenty of air going to it. It still takes a while to cool off between times. You got to go throw it back on right away, because the fan in the welder kicks off with the circuit breaker, and it's got to be on to keep that welder cool. So you got to go turn it back on and then let it sit for a while, and I was able to get an inch or two at a time. Once I had quit and went in and had lunch and edited a video and give it over an hour, and I come back out and it still kicked off. So I went and got another circuit breaker. Those square D Homeline circuit breakers, they don't seem like they're very strong to begin with, and once they've been kicked on and off a few times, it seems like they just get weaker and weaker. I was able to switch out the circuit breaker and put a new one in, and then it was working pretty good. This back side, I had a hard time on this side because there was a lot of fresh snow on the ground there. It was bright, and I'm looking in here into the snow on this dark side, and I couldn't see very well. So I had to rig up some lights, and of course my lights were all burnt out, so I had to rebuild those. But I got all that working, and then I was having trouble with my glasses fogging up and the lens on the welding hood fogging up, and I could make a short bead on there, and then everything would fog up and I couldn't see, and then I'd get too much stick out, and then it would burn the wire back into the tip on the welder, and then it'd get jammed up, and I'd have to stop and clean it up. And so between the circuit breaker kicking out and my goggles fogging up and my glasses fogging up and stuff, I had a hell of a time with the welds. But I finally got it. I got real good penetration down in there. It's hard to do a good weld with the 30,000 flux core wire. You're just not putting much wire out there at one time, and with only 130 amps. But I was able to get it down in there and get good penetration. There was a pretty good gap between this plate and this angle, and I got down in there and got good beads in there. And then I patted it twice here, one up onto the end of the bead real good and up into the angle, and once onto the Bobcat plate. So I think that one's going to be pretty good. I got my bucket repairs done, I hope. I got this right side welded on pretty much just like they did the left side. Got a nice gap in there between that Bobcat where I cut that flange off of there before. Had a nice gap in there and got a good root weld, and then a couple of passes, fill passes on the outside of it. And then I went, got a couple other attachments for the Bobcat. I went and measured those to see where that pinhole went in it. And it was, then I measured the center to center distance on the pins on the Bobcat on the machine, and I come up with measurements that are right in line with where the one hole was on the other flange there. So I drilled a hole in it and for a pilot hole, and then took the torch and cut the hole out, just kind of a rough cut. I thought about bringing the plasma torch down here to do it, to make a nice neater cut on it, but I just went with the easy way. The torch was all set up. So this one's welded up pretty good. This one's welded up pretty good. Wasn't sure about the weld where this flange here is attached to the plate there. Well, I put a weld in it. And then there was a crack in the weld up here on top where this plate attaches to the bucket itself. And I ground that out, and a big gap in there that they just bridged, and hopefully I filled it and got it welded up. So I think that's enough repairs for now to do what I need to do now. This side over here kind of blew out last summer, and I went ahead and loaded a lot of mud and a lot of rock with that on there like that. I tried thinking about repairing it. I took my watchmaker's hammer there and tried to persuade it in a little bit to get it together to maybe weld it up, but it wasn't budging, so I'll have to figure something else out, use some other extreme measures to get that thing together later, but I don't want to take the time to fool with it now. So anyway, we'll go hook the machine up to it and see if we can move some snow with it without it falling off. Well, so far this thing's working real good, real happy. No cracks in it or anything, which there shouldn't be for just plowing snow. That's pretty easy on it compared to doing rock and dirt. But it's not wiggling at all. It's a lot tighter than it used to be. There's no slop in the bucket at all in the attachment. It used to bounce around pretty good even when I first got it. So it's working pretty good. I can see all the welds and everything as I raise the bucket to dump it on the bottom and keep an eye on them. We'll keep knocking that pile down and get it down to where we got a place to put more snow if fresh snow comes.